Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the secret history of a song you've probably sung 100 times. It's a carol that feels as old and timeless as Christmas itself. But as you're about to see, its story is just full of twists, turns, and some pretty surprising disagreements.
You know these words, right? They're instantly recognizable. They just ring out from shopping malls, church choirs, and car radios all December long. They are, without a doubt, a pillar of the Christmas soundtrack.
But what if I told you that the beloved carol we all know and sing is actually an accident? A combination that both of its original creators would have almost certainly rejected, maybe even hated.
Okay, so let's dive into how this all happened. The lyrics and the music weren't just written separately. They were born over 100 years apart, for completely different reasons, by two men who never even met.
So on one side you have Charles Wesley, a famous Methodist preacher who wrote this sacred hymn way back in 1739. And in his head, he imagined it being sung to a really slow, solemn, churchy kind of tune. Then, over a century later, you have the famous composer Felix Mendelssohn. He writes this big, triumphant, and totally secular piece of music to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the Gutenberg printing press. Had absolutely nothing to do with Christmas.
And Mendelssohn himself was super clear about this. He actually described his own melody as soldier-like and said it would never do to sacred words. He wanted something that sounded national and merry, not religious. He thought it was completely the wrong fit. So how in the world did they get fused together? Well, you can thank an English organist named William H. Cummings. In 1855, he's the one who decided to just ignore what both creators wanted. He paired Wesley's powerful words with Mendelssohn's powerful tune, and boom, accidentally created one of the most famous carols in history.
But the plot thickens. The story doesn't stop with the music. The lyrics we all belt out today have also been changed. They are not what Charles Wesley originally wrote.
Check this out. Let's look at the original opening line. Wesley didn't write, "Hark, the herald angels sing." Nope. He wrote, "Hark how all the welkin rings." A completely different image.
So you're probably asking, what on earth is a welkin? Well, it's just an old, poetic English word for the sky or the heavens. So Wesley's original line meant, listen to how the entire sky is ringing out with praise. It was a pretty common word in poetry back then, but obviously it's totally fallen out of use.
So who made the change? It was a man named George Whitefield, who was actually a friend and fellow co-founder of the Methodist movement. In 1753, he changed the line for his own hymn book, probably because welkin was already starting to sound a little old-fashioned. And the story goes that Wesley was not happy about it. He felt like someone was messing with his art.
So let's talk a little bit more about the man who actually penned these powerful words, Charles Wesley. He wasn't just some casual poet. He was an absolute literary and spiritual giant. Just look at this number, 9,000. That is an almost unimaginable amount of writing. Wesley was one of the most prolific hymn writers in history, and his work really does form the bedrock of Christian music.
To put that in perspective, that's like writing a complete, finished poem every 2 days for 50 straight years. His creativity was just relentless, and it was all driven by his deep faith. You see, for Wesley, hymns weren't just art for art's sake. They were tools. He preached to thousands of working-class people who didn't go to church, out in open fields and at factory gates. His hymns were a way to teach complex theology and inspire faith in people who might never pick up a book. He wanted to take the catchy pub tunes of the day and give them a sacred purpose. So, as we've seen, this carol was never set in stone. It was this living, breathing thing that was constantly being tweaked and adapted by new people and new generations. This timeline really shows you just how much it changed over the years. Wesley writes the original in 1739, then in 53, Whitefield changes that first line, then in 1760, another guy, Martin Madan, adds the line, "Christ is born in Bethlehem," and it's almost a century after that, in 1855, that Cummings finally sets the whole thing to Mendelssohn's music. The song just kept evolving. So, with this messy, accidental history, why has this carol not just survived, but actually become one of the most beloved of all time? Well, the answer really lies in the profound theological ideas that Wesley packed into his verses.
Wesley's lyrics are just incredibly rich. They're not just about a baby in a manger. They're about huge concepts, like reconciliation between God and humanity. They try to explain the incredible mystery of the Incarnation. That line, "Veiled in flesh the Godhead see." They celebrate Jesus as Emmanuel, which literally means God with us. and they connect the birth of Christ directly to the promise of resurrection. This is powerful, timeless stuff.
Ultimately, the story of this carol shows that tradition isn't always a straight line. It's really more like a conversation across centuries, a collaboration between people who never even met. And that really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other things that we hold dear, that we think of as ancient and unchanging, are actually, just like this song, these beautiful accidental masterpieces.